Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Servants. Today, we're going to be looking into one of the most iconic characters, not just in Fate Grand Order, but Fate as a franchise as a whole. Yes, I am talking about our very own Chaldean idol who can appear in any singularity or event simply because she chooses to. One of the various stars of My Serial Killer Can't Be This Cute, Elizabeth Bathory, or as I will be calling her throughout this video, Liz. My personal relationship with Liz is a love-hate one. I love her design. I hate the fact that I have her at what would be about NP 8 by now on my main account, and that she has appeared as one of my first 4-star servants on every single account I have ever made, including my 2JP account, where she was pulled as a member of my first 10 pull. I cannot escape Liz, and neither can the rest of the FGO community for that matter, as she has appeared as a welfare for almost every Halloween event. However, there is another character inextricably tied to Liz as well, that being the Countess of Blood, Carmilla. In this video, I will be giving an overview of Liz's history, then the story of Carmilla, and then how they are connected in history, and then finally briefly explaining the nonsense that is the Lizverse, patent pending. So, without further ado, let's get started. Countess Elizabeth Bathory de Essed was born in 1560 to Nyírbátor in Hungary, to a royal family. Her father was Baron George Bathory, and her mother was Baroness Anna Bathory, with whom she was connected to the Prince of Transylvania and the King of Poland. This is a good time to address something that is touched on in Fate and often asked around about when discussing Liz. Is she related to Vlad Tepes, aka Vlad the Impaler, aka Count Dracula? The simple answer to this is we do not know. It is possible that they are connected through royal blood, but after looking at her direct family tree, Vlad does not make an appearance. However, this does not mean that they have no relation. These two figures existed roughly 100 years apart, so there is the potential for gene mixing to have occurred in that window of time. Another interesting note is that both were members of the Order of the Dragon, which was a chivalric order of aristocrats, and is what inspired the draconic crest of Elizabeth Bathory. This is also explained in-game why she has the dragon attribute despite being a lizard. So, that is how they are connected. If someone out there has a better resource than me and wants to correct this, please let me know. Liz was a sickly child. She suffered from epilepsy, which would cause her seizures. The cure for the time was to add blood from a non-epileptic person to the lips of the sufferer. This falls in line with what at the time was known as the 4 humors. These included yellow bile, black bile, phlegm, and blood. To make a complex subject simple, each of the humors dictated a part of how the body and soul operated. The blood was the humor tied with activeness, nutrition, and energy. So, the thought process behind applying it to the lips of someone suffering from a seizure would be that the good blood would balance out the bad blood in their body, thus curing the patient. Do not try this at home, as it does not work. But this may be where her obsession with blood first came from. It is rumored that the Bathorys were wicked people, practitioners of Satanism and violent torturers, and that they had raised Liz in this environment to be a merciless killer. However, this is primarily hearsay done to discredit the royal family. The truth of the matter is this: she currently is falling in line with classic serial killer creation. Note, what I am about to describe is the mix to potentially cause someone to be a serial killer. This does not mean that they will be. She likely suffered from head injuries at a young age, given her extreme epilepsy. She was likely somewhat neglected through virtue of being born a royal, and finally, she had exposure to something macabre that could cure her, giving her an obsession a la Richard Chase. I am not an expert on serial killers by any stretch of the imagination, but this is a fairly constant trend that we see with them. However, once again, this is all speculation on my part. To add to this, there is evidence, albeit very limited, that at the age of 13, Liz actually gave birth to a child said to have been fathered by a peasant, who was then castrated and given away to peasants to hide the shame. Though, this is likely untrue and done to discredit the Bathory family after she came clean about the murders. She was raised as a Calvinist, and through virtue of her status was granted a good education. In 1575, she would marry a man named Count Ferenc Nadasi, and his gift to her was Castle Sejest. Liz was around 14 or 15, in other words, how she appears in-game, and he was around 20 to 21 at the time of the marriage. 3 years later, Nadasi would be made a chief commander of the Hungarian army against the Ottoman Empire, and as such, left for war. During his absence, Liz would manage his estates and businesses, and was also charged with the defense of Sejest, which was unfortunately placed in an area that the Ottomans could easily invade. This is because Hungary was split between Royal Hungary and Ottoman Hungary, and Sejest was pretty much right on the border. During this time as well, Liz would assist in negotiating with the Ottomans on behalf of the women of Sejest in order to get back their captured husbands. Nadasi was also able to return to Liz during lulls in the fighting, and the pair would have 5 children together that we know of. These were Anna, Oriska, Katalin, Andris, and Paul Nadasi. Then, in 1604, after 29 years of marriage, Nadasi would die of an unknown illness and entrusted the care of his wife to a man named Georgi Turzo. It seems that the death of her husband created a void in Liz. Note that some of these actions may have been performed while her husband was alive, and that she simply ramped up post-mortem. This is because around the year 1604 is when the rumors began to spread about Liz's devious nature, to put it lightly. She enjoyed the feeling of torturing others, and is often speculated that she did so for sexual reasons, making her unique among female serial killers. Supposedly, she would attempt to recapture her youth by kidnapping young girls from Segest and drinking their blood. Remember, this falls back into the Four Humors idea that the active life energy of blood would actually restore one's vigor. From here, we are going to get a touch more graphic than normal, so if you are a bit squeamish, go ahead and skip ahead. She was also said to slather victims in honey and then tie them up outside so that she could watch insects eat the person alive. Slowly, but surely. She would strip others naked in the bitter cold of winter and then force them to bathe in ice water tubs. She was also a fan of probing her victims with needles, sticking them in various places all over the body, as well as using white-hot irons to brand and stab them. There are even accounts of her using scissors to slowly snip away parts of some. But where she likely primarily gets her vampiric visage from is from the unusual torture of biting a victim herself, coupled with the fact that she did indeed drink blood. This is what is cited as being the root for why people believe these crimes were sexual in nature as well, as this is viewed as a very intimate action. For the record, it is well accepted that she did not actually bathe in the blood of virgins, as this was a detail first accounted for 100 years after her death, though it certainly does make for a gruesome picture. Where she made her biggest mistake was beginning to kill members of the royal family. Note that not a soul among the highborn nobles cared that she had been killing so many peasants, but once she switched to low-ranking nobles, it suddenly became a problem. It's been like this forever. These girls were sent to her to be educated in the ways of royalty, as well as some standard education. Once these people began asking questions as to why their daughters had died, an investigation was launched, and over 300 witnesses attested to the above-listed crimes. In opposition to the oft-claimed account that Thurzo caught her in the middle of torturing someone, in December of 1610, he walked in on her having dinner with guests and announced that she was to be arrested for her crimes, taking both her and 4 other servants said to be accomplices into custody. Here is where things get muddy. The witnesses never claimed to have seen anything, and rather had just heard of her actions from others. The servants who were arrested confessed to the crimes only after they were tortured. Note that this is not credible in the slightest, as medieval torture was incredibly brutal, and oftentimes was going to end with you being killed anyway, so just saying you did it to quicken up the process was the smartest thing to do. Mind you, there are really accounts of noble girls' bodies found with evidence of torture on them. 2 trials were held in the first week of January, and while she was never actually convicted, she was accused of 650 murders. Keep in mind, this number comes from one account of a servant girl named Susanna, who claimed to have seen the number written in a book belonging to a court official. Is the number accurate? That answer is honestly lost to time. There are 2 accounts of what happened to Liz after this. One is that she was put under medieval house arrest and that she was not permitted to leave Castle Segest, and that she would die at the age of 54. The other and more famed way that she dies is that she was bricked up in a room. This account comes from Thurzo, so I'm more inclined to believe it. In this confinement, she is said to have lived for 4 years, composing a will for her children to inherit all of her estate. Her final words were said to a servant, complaining that her hands were cold. The servant told her that it was nothing and that she should lie down. She did so and then passed away. The villagers would not permit her to be buried in Castle Segest, so legend has it that she was whisked away to her family's tomb in Ased. But that is the life and crimes of Elizabeth Bathory, a bloody countess with a demonic hobby. But let us now look into her purported older self, Carmilla. Carmilla is a novel by Sheridan Le Fanu, and is one of the very first vampire novels, even older than Dracula. I have read Carmilla in the past, and I would recommend that you do so as well, but for now, I will briefly summarize the plot. The story begins with a young girl named Laura, who is reminiscing about her childhood spent at an old castle. Laura, who was 6 at the time, is visited by a beautiful vision of a woman by her bedside. The woman bites Laura on the breast, and then Laura awakens, revealing no mark. Time skip to when Laura is 18, and she is admiring a sunset with her father, who tells her a friend of his who is a general was going to be visiting with his niece, but that the niece had mysteriously died. The friend wants to discuss the circumstances of the death with them. Heartbroken at the loss of a potential friend, Laura wishes for some form of companion. A carriage crashes outside the castle, and a girl named Carmilla, who is around Laura's age, comes into the family's care for a short while. This is because she has been injured and the mother needed to continue on. She warns the pair that Carmilla will not disclose any information about who they are and that she is not a crazy person. The pair recognize each other as being from the dream from 12 years ago. The two become fast friends and Carmilla appears to be romantically interested in Laura. However, various quirks about her start to emerge. She will not pray, she sleeps most of the day, and she walks around during the night. Over time, Laura begins having nightmares about a cat attacking her and biting her breasts, and she even sees Carmilla covered in blood in her room. As time goes on, Laura's health begins to fail. A doctor finds the puncture wounds and recommends that Laura never be alone. Laura and her father go to visit a village called Karnstein, and along the way they meet the friend from the beginning of the story. He tells them that his daughter Bertha met a young girl and her mother at a ball, and that the two had become fast friends. However, over the course of 3 weeks, Bertha's health declined much like Laura's. Realizing that it was actually a monster, the friend hid in his daughter's room with a sword, and then an indescribable black mass appeared. He attacked the creature, which took the form of the beautiful woman and fled through the door. However, it was too late and his daughter had died. Laura's father wishes to kill the vampire while it rests, knowing that it was once in the village of Karnstein. So, he goes to ask about the tomb's location. While alone with the friend, Carmilla appears before Laura. Carmilla and the friend recognize each other, and in a rage, the friend attacks her, but she escapes. The friend claims that Carmilla and the mysterious woman are the same person. An ancestor of a vampire hunter hears of their plight and offers to help them. He locates Carmilla's tomb, which had been hidden, and finds that the body is covered in blood and breathing lightly. It suddenly opens its eyes just to watch as the group plunges a stake through its heart. They then decapitate the head and the body is burned to ashes, which are then scattered in the river, thus ridding themselves of the creature. The connection between Liz and Carmilla is fairly clear. Both assault young girls to get at their blood. The difference is that Carmilla's depiction in Fate does not match that of her depiction in literature. In Fate, she is very clearly an adult Liz, and her skill set as well as her demeanor reflect that. However, there is no evidence to suggest that she was a torturer in her original appearance, outside of the torment that she caused to get at her victims, of course. That said, the fact that she does have vampirism and an anti-female niche does lend credence to her original self. One other part of Carmilla's design that is worth bringing up is the Iron Maiden. For one, the Iron Maiden is likely not real. Let me explain. The device in which we generally ascribe the Iron Maiden to is in actuality something known as a Schandmantel, which was used to restrain the body, arms, legs, what have you, so that you could keep a person imprisoned anywhere that you like. The misconception of them having spikes is likely archaeological misidentification, as no such use of the device is mentioned in the historical record, and most certainly not used by either Carmilla or Elizabeth Bathory. However, similar devices have been recorded, but were used by the ancient Greeks, not the Hungarians. So really, Carmilla falls into a mixed existence, even down to her noble phantasm being a character shrouded in layers of mystery. However, from her Bond CE, it can be assumed that the Iron Maiden is meant to represent the aforementioned Schandmantel that was the room in which she was bricked up in for all those years, slowly draining her life away as she did to so many other young girls. Though of course, this is just me theory crafting. But that is the historical characters. Now let's get to the nonsense. My love for Liz comes from her being a comedic ray in otherwise serious stories. She's an idol-type servant, simply for the reason of admiring the control that idols have over their audience. As a Lancer, she is the Liz we all know, cute, awkward, and a bit of a goofball. However, she is beginning to rival Artoria in her class coverage as well. In order by release, she is a Lancer as standard, a caster, dressed as such for Halloween and changing her class to be better suited for the witchy mood, a saber caused by the fusion of her Lancer and caster selves in order to become a hero to defeat Cleopatra after she crashed her lone pyramid into Castle Segis. Jesus Christ. She has 2 alter ego forms, Mecha Ellie-chan Mark I and Mark II, created to guard Castle Segis, an unknown Oni class, but I would like to estimate would be a berserker at some point, or a costume dress, which would be really nice, appearing as the king of Oni Land, and most recently a rider, taking the guise of Cinderella after finally demanding that she fall in love or something. It's confusing. If we count Carmilla on this list, then she is also an assassin and an additional rider. So, she's just missing an archer and a berserker from being able to be made into a full support list. Someone needs to put a stop to this madness. Or don't, it's wild. But that is it! Thank you all so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. Like the video as it really does help out the channel. Subscribe to catch these as they go up. If you would like me to cover a certain servant, let me know down in the comments. Follow my Twitch for significantly less structured content. I also have a Twitter, but for now, keep your chin up. Peace.